video on courgette soup. So I was making a video the other day about soup, and I had this thought in my head that you don't get as a higher yield of soup from vegetables that have a higher water content in them compared to a vegetable that's more fibrous. So my thoughts were you get more soup from a kilo of carrots than you do from a kilo of courgettes, because in a comparison of flavour and consistency. So if you were to get a courgette soup and make it the same consistency as a carrot soup, I think you'd have to use more courgettes than you would do carrots. So I'd probably maybe 1.5 kilos of courgettes would give you the same consistency and of soup than a kilo of carrots would, because of the water content. And I need to test that, because I can't just say things and just kind of make them up off the top of my head. And I was also kind of quite curious. So I'm going to make some courgette soup, and I can compare it to the volume we get from carrot soup, which I've got the recipe for in one of my other videos. So we have got about 350 grams worth of onion, and we've got a kilo of courgettes. Not a whole kilo of courgettes, because obviously we've cut the ends off the courgettes. I've cooked down the onions because the onions take longer to cook than the courgettes, and there was a little bit of water in there. So I'm going to put in 300 millilitres worth of water, and there's 2 stock cubes in there already. I think it'll need a 3rd stock cube, to say the least. Let's not put it in just yet. Let's just cook it first. So bring it up to the boil, and in hot water. So we'll bring it up to the boil, we'll cook the courgettes. I'm not that bothered about losing the flavour, losing the colour of the green of the courgettes. I'm not particularly very bothered about that today. If I wanted to make a bright, vibrant courgette soup, what I'd do is I'd cut the outside green parts off the courgettes, and I'd chop those very smallly, and then the insides of the courgettes I would cook those first with the onions, and then for the last 5 minutes I would rapidly boil it, add back the green parts, rapidly boil it for 5 minutes, and then puree it and serve it straight away. And then you would get the flavour of the courgettes, a soft, smooth soup, and retain the green colour. So let's see how we go. So there'll be about, I put 300 millilitres of liquid in there, but there'll be about I cooked the onions with a bit of liquid, so there'll be about 50 millilitres worth of liquid of that. So we just need to put that in the recipe. So we'll cook that down with the lid on, because it'll cook quicker, and won't lose moisture. And then what we'll do is we'll puree it, we'll add a bit of milk, we'll puree it, we'll get it to a good consistency, and then we'll check the volume, and then we'll be able to see how much soup a kilo of courgettes makes compared to a kilo of carrots. Right, so it's cooked down. As you can see, it's cooked down a lot, down to nothing. So I reckon once we start pureeing that, that most of that will just turn into like a thin liquid. How does it taste? It needs another stock cube in. So that kind of might dictate how much volume of liquid we get. So 200 millilitres of milk. That might be a bit too much. That's 150-ish. So I pulled it off the gas, so I'll have to move it, and you can see how dirty the cooker is. Certainly put in 200 millilitres worth of liquid and splash myself. I suppose I really should have checked how much a kilo of carrots makes soup wise, shouldn't I? I might have to pause and look at one of my videos. quick taste, and then we'll add some more. It's going to need some more water. That's nice. So we'll put a little bit of salt in. Are we going to put another stock cube in? No, let's just put a bit of salt in. So a little bit of salt and some pepper. That much pepper. And then, how much liquid we're going to put in? 100 millilitres, maybe? Maybe? Yeah, sounds about 100 millilitres. So we'll just do that there. I think we'll get away with another 100 millilitres. 90. I can't measure things on the weighing scales on camera because the board's not level, so it doesn't give an accurate reading. So. That's good consistency. Right, so yeah, as always. So this is plastic, that's metal. We don't bang that on metal, we bang that on our hand, otherwise we'll crack the plastic. So that out of the way, and then let's see what kind of volume we've got. And then then I'll just quickly pause. Well, I'll stop the video, and then we'll see how much. Just about 2 litres. Just about 2 litres. Just so slightly over 2 litres, or maybe 2 litres on the nose actually. That's useful to know, isn't it? So with the scrapings out in there, there'll be about 2 litres. So we'll pause and we'll just quickly look at my carrot soup recipe. Right, so I have checked my carrot soup recipe, and 500 grams worth of carrots makes, and about 300 grams worth of onion makes about 1.5 litres. So if we were to use slightly onion slightly out, yeah. So if we were to use 1 kilo of carrots, then we certainly would get more than 2 litres worth of soup. So I was right that if we're making soup with vegetables that have got a higher water content, that aren't as fibrous as other vegetables, so like a butternut squash and a carrot will give you a higher volume of soup for the weight of them. So that's kind of quite interesting to know, isn't it? So if we kind of think, if we're going to be making, so even though a vegetable might be cheaper per kilo, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give us more soup than a vegetable that's a little bit more expensive. So so if onions are, so if courgettes are £1 a kilo and carrots are 50p a kilo, you're going to get more. No, the other way. No, let's do that the other way around. So if carrots were £1 a kilo and courgettes were 80p a kilo, you'd be better off buying the carrots to make soup, because you get a high yield of soup for your money. Even though the carrots were 20p more a kilo, you'd get more soup, and so the more soup would kind of justify spending more money on carrots, if that makes sense. That makes sense to me. So carrots are kind of pretty cheap, but if you compared something like courgettes to butternut squash, like, I suppose they're kind of probably a little bit comparable in price wise. So it was about £2.50 for the kilo of courgettes. I think about £2.50 without checking the receipt, and that's about the price of a butternut, depending on the time of year. So you would, but the butternut squash, even though you kind of had to peel the outside, you would get a higher yield of soup for the money than you would with courgettes, even though the courgette soup is easier to make. So that's kind of quite interesting to know. Certainly in these times of frugality, and where you have to think about what kind of money you're spending. So that's kind of quite interesting to know, and it's answered the question, and I was right, which is nice, although it's sometimes just as helpful to be wrong, and then you kind of question what you're doing. But anyway, so there we go. If you're not interested in that aspect of the soup, still a delicious recipe to make a wonderful courgette soup, which is pretty straightforward and doesn't require too much chopping or kind of like to cut through a butternut and carrots. It's a lot more difficult than it is to cut through courgette. But anyway, courgette soup and a success.